is up, guys? Steven here, and today I'm going to be talking about the patch notes that Splatoon released last night for 2.7.0, which will be coming out on the 13th. Now, Splatoon has done, in my opinion, and Nintendo, of course, the makers, have done an incredible job of recognizing things that needed to be changed in the game and not being afraid to change them. And that's just one of the amazing things, is that they've been making a lot of really some small changes to enhance your gameplay experience, as well as making larger changes that have really affected the game. A good example of this was nerfing all rollers to have less damage on the ends of the roller, as well as the last update where they made a lot of changes to abilities and made certain abilities that used to be really just completely outclassed better, and making that made them more viable. So that's really great. And this update, they made a lot of changes that I think were really intelligent, and I really couldn't be more pleased with what Nintendo chose to do for this update. So I'm just kind of going to go through the list of updates and explain my thoughts on them, and really just what makes me so happy about them. So this is the first update, and basically what they did is previously, every time you died in Splatoon, 50% of the charge that you had on your special gauge would go away. So this was one of the deterrents to dying, is that you lose that charge that you had on your special gauge, and you had to refill it more to get back up to your special. And what they ended up doing is they changed it, and this is actually really fascinating, is that on the game screen it will show, when you're picking your weapon, what the reduction in your special gauge will be. So for these weapons that are in the top box, now instead of 50% of your special gauge going away every time you die, 75% will go away. And there are a couple things that are really interesting to see. The Tentatex are on here, which is really fascinating because they already nerfed the Tentatech earlier by decreasing its damage per shot by 1. And they raised the amount of charge that you need in order to get Inkzuka, because it's really good. And doing this to the Tentatech, it really balances it, because one of the things that was just so good about it is that it could get, since it had good ink coverage, it could get Inkzuka relatively quickly, and that mitigated its rather poor range. So now it's definitely going to be a more balanced set. 96 gal deco, you don't get Kraken as quickly, which is really nice. And they've actually done a lot with 96, so we'll get into that later. Luna Blaster Neo, which is probably the best, or it's at least the most used blaster, and it had Bomb Rush, so that's kind of cool. The Dynamo Rollers don't care so much about regular Dynamo Roller, which I believe just has Ink Strike. But the gold one has Echolocator, and since it covered turf really quickly, having Echolocator is pretty cool. And then the three chargers, the three main chargers, which I don't necessarily agree with, but they did buff these later, so I think that's relatively fair. And if you're playing a charger, you're not supposed to be dying a lot anyway. So these in the middle box go from 50%, which is what they were all at previously, to 60%. Splattershot Junior, now a lot of people have been running sets that basically just you try to farm Bubbler as much as possible, so this mitigates that ability. 52 gal, which the 52 gal has Killer Whale, and you could obviously farm those really quickly because it charges really quickly, so that's pretty nice. And then for these, the other ones that are really kind of interesting to me are Krak-On Splat Roller, which has Kraken, and they've been nerfing Krak-On Splat Roller pretty much every update. and I think that it's almost excessive at this point, but it's kind of an annoying weapon to face, so I'm not too terribly upset. And the other interesting one is the E-leaders, because they were always really good at getting their special, especially the regular E-leaders, not the custom ones, because they had echolocator as well, so you could farm those very quickly, and that was a really good way to refill your ink, as well as the customs, which have Kraken, and we all hate Kraken. Zinc Mini Splatling, which is Bubbler, and Heavy Splatling Deco, which is Kraken. So the general trend is that the top large reduction is basically just sets and weapons that were really, really good in general and just needed a debuff as a whole. The medium reductions, to me, are mostly Bubblers and Krakens. And that's pretty interesting because those are things that are very spammable because they save, they give you invulnerability, which is obviously really good. And then everything else only gets a 40% drop now. So everything that isn't on this list actually got a buff, which is pretty cool. So let's keep going. Player performance balances. So this decreased the swim speed by 10% when these weapons are equipped. And the things that it really affects are the dynamo rollers, which are huge. They're meant to be huge, slow, and heavy, hard to swing. That's why they have a slow swing. But you could swim pretty quickly with them. So now having this reduction by 10%, which is about equivalent to how much Ninja Squid slows you down, so you can think of it that way. It's really nice because they're not going to be as mobile out in the open, and that will really help to balance those weapons in addition to making it harder to get echolocator with them. So now onto main weapons. Alright, so the Splash-O-Matic, which is a weapon that I've always enjoyed, actually got 3 buffs, which is incredible. The initial velocity of shots increased by 10%. Now that kind of seems abstract, and it's kind of hard to understand what that necessarily means. So what that means is that the shots will reach the end maximum useful range faster. So that means that it's harder to dodge the shots because they come out faster. And also it means that you have to predict less when you're aiming. The spread is reduced by 10%, and that might sound like a bad thing. Oh, you want to cover the ground. But basically, what that means is that the shot RNG is reduced by 10%. It means that the weapon is more accurate. And the range is increased by 10%, which is obviously good. I appreciate this because Splash-O-Matic has always been in direct competition with Tentatek, and it's just been objectively worse. But now that they've increased these stats, it might actually be about on the same level, especially considering the fact that it now falls into this category where its special only gets reduced 40% every death. So you can play more aggressively with it, and I believe that Neo Splash-O-Matic has Bomb Rush, which is pretty cool. Next, we got N-Zaps, which are pretty good. I have no idea what these buffs mean, but they buffed it, so that's cool. Splattershot Pros. Splattershot Pro has basically always been in direct competition with 96 Gal, and 96 Gal Deco in particular. And it was always outclassed because it had worse ink efficiency, about the same range, and didn't have as good as sets. However, they increased the velocity of shots by 20%, which again means that it's harder to dodge and you basically shoot faster, which is good. And the range was increased by 5%. So that means that now the Splattershot Pro has a range of like 74, 73, something like that. So it clearly easily outranges stuff like 96 Gal and Dual Squelcher, which gives it a niche, and it's really actually going to be one of my favorite sets. I'm telling you right now. I've always loved Splattershot Pro, and I think that this is actually going to make it really nice. Now here's one of the big ones that they kind of went way out and really hit something hard. So the 96 Gal and the Gal Deco, they decreased the damage per shot from 62 to 52. And That's incredible, because they had said that they nerfed the Tenatech a lot when they lowered its damage per shot by 1 from 35 to 34, or 36 to 35. So dropping it 10 points is huge. And really what it means is that these sets can no longer afford to not run a damage up, because any amount of defense up will make the weapon a 3-shot kill, which is such a big difference from a 2-shot kill. And it's really good because those sets can't be running stat buffs for everything else. They have to allocate some of those slots to damage up if they want to have that 2-shot kill. And of course this is just going to cause damage up creep and defense up creep, but that's fine. If you're forced to run that, then you don't have as many options, which is nice. And its accuracy was improved. So they made the damage much less, but they also decreased the shot RNG. So I think it'll play almost similarly to the old Splattershot Pro. It'll be really interesting. And again, as we saw up here, it got nerfed. The Galdeco did in being able to charge Kraken. So that set in particular got hit really hard, which is good because it was objectively the most balanced, best set on almost every map. So that was good. Jet Squelcher and Custom Jet Squelcher. Movement speed while firing, so like you're strafing, was increased by 50%. That's incredible. That'll make it about the same strafe speed as the 52 gal, which isn't fast, but before the Jet Squelcher, you were just like stuck. You couldn't move at all. So now you'll be a little bit more free. And with stuff like the Pro getting increased range, using a weapon that outranges that is going to be pretty nice. Carbon Roller, ink consumption when flinging ink is reduced. That's fine. And now we get on to these 4 chargers, which they did something really intelligent, I believe. So the range when you're not fully charged is reduced by about 20%. Now what this means is that you cannot use any of these chargers, being the E-liters and the splat chargers, like the Squiffer, where you can charge it quickly and get a kill, because that range is decreased. So that's really good. And their range when fully charged is increased. So that balances it out, and it forces you to play it more as a sniper as opposed to really in any range weapon, because before you could charge, I think it was like for 60 frames with the E-liter and get a kill, and that was slightly slower than the Squiffer. So this is a very intelligent change that they made. Slosher, they reduced the time to fire by about 20% so you can slosh faster, and they increased the amount of time a player who got sloshed gets slowed. This is basically to make Slosher much more effective, and it'll probably make it about as effective as the Tri-Slosher is. And finally, another huge buff, they increased the damage per shot for the Hydra Splatling and the Custom Hydra Splatling, and they raised it from a 4-shot kill to a 3-shot kill. So it's now the only Splatling that is a 3-shot kill. So that makes it a unique weapon that can have a role that the other Splatlings cannot fill. So that's cool. Alright, so now let's get into sub-weapons. Burst bombs. Burst bombs were really annoying because people use them basically as a main weapon on sets like the E-liter, because you can hit people from really close and it's stacked up with damage up so well that you could get a lot of kills very easily because you could just toss them out really fast. However, now it takes up way more ink to throw a burst bomb, so it's not nearly as easy as just chucking a bunch of bombs over and over, and that's excellent because it will force people to use their main weapon as their main weapon, their secondary is their secondary. The difference was that burst bombs could be used effectively to really kill players consistently, whereas every other secondary was used more as a support and not necessarily to get kills, even though you could get kills with them. They weaken the knockback effect, which means if you're up on an E leader and they start throwing burst bombs, you're not going to get knocked back into oblivion to the point where you can't really aim to hit them. And the radius for dealing minimum damage was reduced, so you have to be more accurate with them. To counteract all of these buffs, they also increased the damage that they do, which is fine because you can't throw them that often. And the painting radius was increased, and the radius for dealing medium damage was increased. But that's fine. Like, I honestly think that this is just going to prevent people from spamming them, because it takes 40% of your tank. So there are not going to be a lot of situations in the game where you're going to have, you're only able to throw 2, basically. And there are not many situations in a game, especially with stuff like the LD nozzle nose, where you're going to have more than 80% of your tank. So you're really only able to throw 1, which is pretty cool. Ink Mine, they did something which they really should have done a long time ago, is that if you already have an Ink Mine set, you can place another one and it'll just get rid of the first one. That's a novel idea, that's great. They made Seekers slightly wider and faster, that's fine. And then they nerfed Splash Wall with just kind of a technical glitch in that if you threw it onto a slope, it would come out really quickly. But now it takes the same amount of time for the actual wall to activate if you're throwing on a slope as if you just threw it onto flat ground. So that's cool. And for specials, Ink Strike, it's better. It takes less time to use it, basically. And then finally, they nerfed Cold Blooded, as well as the tagging abilities and items. So basically, over here you have the old and you have the new over here. So point sensors last the same amount of time as they used to. However, Cold Blooded, instead of cutting that time into a fourth, is now only half. An echolocator used to be 12 seconds, and now it's 9 seconds, which means Cold Blooded only lasts 4.5 seconds. Haunt used to be 12 as well, and now that's 9 seconds and 4.5 seconds. So that's a really intelligent nerf, because echolocator and all of those things are basically like a legal wall hack. So making all of them last a smaller amount of time is nice. However, before with Cold Blooded, it basically made point sensors worthless, because it would go away after 2 seconds, which is a really, you can easily hide for 2 seconds and keep playing as if nothing occurred. Making that 4 seconds now, that's better. So I think the dual nerf was intelligent there, and it'll really make other things nice. So yeah, those are my thoughts on this update, which is coming out on the 13th. I'm really pleased with it, and let me know what you guys think in the comments. I really enjoyed this, and see y'all next time. Peace.